Welcome to the webinar today, which is entitled Business Continuity Through Adaptive Thinking. So when you had a look at and booked into this session, you would have found that it was all about forging ahead with your business by taking an innovative approach. And the major thoughts that were presented in that were using business continuity and adaptive thinking to move through to the rest of 2020 and then to succeed in business into the future. So let me introduce myself. Just want to find the click. So my name's Christine Smith, and I'm here today to present, possibly because of the long experience that I bring to how to manage a business, not only a small business, but a business that involves practical ways to move forward. As you can see from the slide here, I've got experience over a long period of time, both in business and in technology, and my speciality is in positioning you potentially as the business owner or the business manager, somebody who's very senior in the business and can make decisions for the business, both to position you and also to help you clarify your direction, to set your priorities, to choose your approach and take action. And we're going to finish on that thought at the end. So meanwhile, back on the range, let's get going. So there's a classicness about business. We're actually wanting to forge ahead. We all think we're going to take an innovative approach, and we all think that we're going to be able to guide our business through the rest of its processes. And actually what we're about is to succeed. Of course, what we know from the last few months is that sometimes hits a roadblock or two that we're not expecting. So before we get going, let's have a little bit of a think about what we're doing today. This is a webinar, so lots of us are very familiar with Zoom as a meeting platform. Today we're going to use Zoom as a webinar, which means there's not so much face-to-face interaction. There will be a recording, and for today's session, you'll be on listen only. Now, in case you're rather new to this, I'd like to know that you know how to use your menu bar. So the very first thing I'd like you to do is to make sure that what you do is you wiggle your cursor if you're on a PC and see if you can find the menu bar. It sort of pops up. And because this is a webinar today, you'll find that the menu bar looks a little bit different. It's got on it a thing you don't see in meetings, and that's Q&A. And if you'd like to pose a question during the session or at the end in our Q&A session, you'll need to find the button that says Q&A. You'll also find there's a chat button, and you're most welcome to choose that chat button and talk during the session, or not talk, print, or at the end. And in fact, this is when you're going to find our mysterious other person. And that mysterious other person to whom I'd like to introduce you is Jack Cameron. Jack, can you turn on your camera just for a moment?
Yes, I can. Hello.
It's coming, it's coming. Jack is our technical person today, somebody who will co-produce with me so that as you ask questions and as you pose, or what we'd like to find out if you've got a problem with your screen or whatever, please send a chat and Jack will be happy to help. So our very first thing we're going to do today is introduce the next thing on your menu bar, which is raise your hand. And so what I'd really like to do is to pose the question and get each of you to raise your hand. So we're going to practice being, I don't know, somewhere like the floor of Parliament, where we have the yeas and the nays. So what I'd like you to do is to listen to my question, and then if you've got a yes answer, raise your hand. So that'll be the yeas. So my question is, did you have to change anything in your business as COVID hit? If your answer is yes, please raise your hand. Jack's going to watch out for the yays.
All right, so we have about half of the listeners put up their hand.
Great. So about half of us had to change our business as we went into the COVID period. Okay, now I'm looking for the people going out of COVID. So my question is, going out of COVID about now, are you thinking you can leave your business as it was before COVID? I'm hoping your answer's no, but I'm looking for no's. Anyway, could you please put your hand up? Jack's put all the hands down already, I'm sure. If you reckon your business can operate exactly the same, whether you're not going to have to make any differences. If you're not going to have to make any changes, put up your hand and say, no, I'm not going to make any changes to my business. It's fine as it was before COVID.
No one has put their hand up.
Well, I'm glad you're at this webinar then, because that's what this is about. I'm assuming, and I think all of us are finding, that what we tend to hear about called the new normal doesn't allow us to do exactly as we did before. Or even more on the positive, it allows us to bring in changes that we might have wanted to do earlier, but couldn't. So, the posing of this session has in it the words adaptive thinking. And adaptive thinking is something which every single one of us is going to need into the future. An ability to recognise unexpected situations, quickly consider various possible responses, and decide which one's best for us. Now, in the world of adaptive thinking, I thought I'd tell you a little story. So, back in about 1968, the Americans were posing themselves into a war, Vietnam War actually, one of those that caused a lot of controversy around the world, just like we've had a lot of controversy in Australia around how to respond and how to deal with the threat to business of the COVID situation. Late in 1968, the success of those Navy fighter pilots started to drop quite a bit. And so the American military said, hey, what are we going to do about this? And what they did is created a thing called the Top Gun School. I'm sure you've all heard of the Top Gun movie. And in fact, that Top Gun movie tells us, I didn't realise till I was researching for this seminar, actually, the Top Gun School is about the best US fighter pilots being trained to fly and fight like their opposition. And once they learned to fly and fight like the opposition, they became instructors for new pilots coming in. And in fact, what happened then was the success of the pilots actually came to something like 6 times more than it had been before. Now, I don't really want to talk about that bit so much, except what I do want to talk to you about, this story here, is the result, is the thought of adaptive thinking. The result was taking what you need to do, what you need to recognize, how you need to know you need to operate, and turning that into the choices of what you do and doing it. So to recap, adaptive thinking is about being able to recognize an unusual situation, being able to consider what to do, and then deciding what to do. Now, the classic situation for most business people is they're told that the key to being adaptive, although that word's not so used so often, the key to being adaptive is business continuity planning. So, what is business continuity planning? Well, the Australian government tells us that when you're running a small business, things always don't go to plan. And my answer is duh. Preparing your business for those events will help you recover as soon as possible if an incident or crisis does come upon us. That's the thing that we're after. We're after a quick response. So the benefit of business continuity planning is to plan, identify and reduce risks where possible, to monitor what's happening, that is, prepare your business for the risks that you can't necessarily control by understanding what you will do if that comes up, then monitoring to see if it happens, and then last of all, respond and recover if an incident or a crisis happens. So the questions that we had posed to us during this session are around these things. It's all very well to say you're going to plan, but when the thing comes upon you, the crisis, the unexpected thing, how on earth do you maintain your focus during that period of time? There's so much happening. How on earth do you cope with all the information that's coming at you from every which way? I don't know about you, but I might have found my mobile phone was my worst enemy. Jolly thing had Facebook on it. Silly thing had news items on it. And even worse, live presentations on announcements and this about this, that and the other from all over Australia and all over the world. I got too much information in my head. Then the next thing that happened for me was that I had to work faster because we're working with small business here. And small business really needs to see, to note, and to respond and to take action. And yet it's really quite hard. What's out there that can help me? Then last of all, our question that we need to answer is, how do you think outside the square? And how and what do you do to adapt? So, how do you maintain focus? So, I don't know if you've heard of this gentleman, but there's a gentleman by the name of Simon Sinek. He is a quite well-known person who talks about how to focus your business. And in the first instance, he talks about the golden circle. Most of us are very, very easily able to describe what we do, what we produce. We can even give you long stories about how we do it. We manufacture this, we get that from there, we do this. The thing that we're most of us not so good on is describing the why. Why do we do it? Because we want to? Actually, the why is what is your marketing story. If you want someone to engage with you in and purchase what you're selling, whether it's a service or a product, a lot of the time it's about telling a story. The sort of story that we often call an elevator pitch. It's the short, sharp thing that says, you know, how some people need this, this, and this. That's their problem. Well, I help them solve the problem by that, that, and that. And even before that, the thing we think about is why. So let me think about you as an owner of a business or someone seeing you in business. This is your vision or mission. This is the reason why you're in the world. If you are in the world to make money, well, your messages will say that. And people who don't like people who are just focused on money are not going to be all that keen on connecting with you. Whereas if you can actually say, I'm about positioning people to do things in their business, to understand their direction and move forward when they're so busy doing their business that they just don't know how to lift their heads, that why is why people connect with me in my small business. And that's what I use in my elevator pitch. So the first thing you need to do to maintain your focus is to understand your why. The next thing's possibly a bit easier, although it still is a problem. Because quite often what we're doing in a business is not something that anybody actually wants. If you want to create baskets that are weaved underwater by octopi, well, I'm not sure anybody really wants that. However, if you can understand the who of your business, who are you trying to help? What is it that you're helping them to solve, how are you doing it, and the how, then you're likely to have the right connections. Those two things, the why and then the customer value proposition, are filters that you need to use on any good idea you have. The next thing we have before we get to be adaptive is we actually need to cope with overload. And I hinted at this earlier. For me, my solution to all that information that was coming in was to put on blinkers, you know, like a horse has got, to help them not be distracted by what's going down the road. I decided that I would, number one, choose when I used my phone and when I looked at Facebook and etc. The next I did was I no longer, and I still no longer look at live feeds, because the comments made by the people watching just distract me out of the world. So no more live feeds. Then the next thing I do is actually go into things like Facebook and tell it I don't want to see any more of this. So what's being fed to me is the stuff that I'm happy to actually see. Like, for instance, something like kindness pandemic, which for me meant I was seeing good stuff to filter out the bad. So number one, coping with overload. Find a way to blinker yourself so you can focus on what you want to. It means you have to work out what actually distracts you. The next is you actually have to look at the world from your perspective. Now, we tend to think about that as being selfish, particularly if you come from my generation. It's sort of like, well, you know, why are you thinking about yourself? Why aren't you just doing everything that anybody wants? It's being helpful. It's customer service, isn't it? Well, my answer is no. It's quite a distraction, particularly if what you do is you end up doing things which are not the focus of your business. You can help people by saying, oh, wow, I understand what you're saying. It's not me that would provide it, but I can help you find somewhere else. I use the, yes, I hear your problem, and I can help you by redirecting you. Or, yes, I can help you solve that problem. Let me tell you how. The next thing to do is to classify everything that comes along from your perspective. And I'm going to use that, I'm going to give you a better example of that in a moment. And the next thing after that is you have to choose your approach. Do you tick, I'm doing, or do you flick it? Not me. In the classification, what we tend to see is the classic one, which is, you know, urgent and important. If it's urgent and important, well, I should do it now. If it's not urgent and not important, I should do it, well, never. But I don't know about you, but I'm really good at doing the not urgent, not important, because it's easy. However, it doesn't help you filter and meet your time requirements on just about anything. So the thing I want to say to you, I want to add to that, is you need to do this classification from your perspective, not someone else's. You and your business are the perspective you need to use. So when we choose what we're going to do, we need to choose the urgent and important, and the important not urgent over the ones on the left-hand side. Now, maybe just to check if you're still listening in, I would like you to answer another question. So let me just get you to the next question. Remember, we're talking about meeting the demand. We're talking about how on earth you spread yourself to everything that needs to be done, particularly when there's crisis. And you've got crisis that's affecting home life, it's affecting you personally, and it's affecting your business, and everybody around you is out of whack, distracted. So my first question, and the one I want to do the hands up to now, if you get ready with how to raise your hand, I want you to answer this question. Have you ever heard yourself say this? The only way to get something done is to do it yourself. So is your answer yes to that question? Have you ever heard yourself say the only way to get something done is to do it yourself? If you wouldn't mind putting your hand up if your answer is yes. How did we go, Jack?
So about 1/4 of the participants put up their hand.
Okay. Oh, this is very nice. There are people here who understand the power of not doing it yourself. That could be helping someone else think about how to do it themselves, or delegation, which we'll talk about again. The next one here is how to meet demand is to make use of your calendar. Calendar is my friend. I tend to use one that's electronic, and I filter this thing and fill this thing based on I first. That's probably back to front for most of us. We tend to go, what appointments have I got? Who do I have to meet? What do I have to do? However, there are some things in your life which are essential. I remember when we had kids and we had them going to out of school hours care, we had them going to school, we actually found that we had to put aside time, evening and weekends, and those things went into the calendar first. Back then it was a paper calendar. They went to the calendar first. They did not get rescheduled and they did not get cancelled. Someone had to do it. And we actually found that that meant that we had family time. The one I'd like you to consider is putting in personal and professional time for you. If that means 2 hours a week, great. If that means one Friday a month, great. Rule for you, set it, keep it. If you must reschedule it, reschedule, don't cancel. And I would use the same for administrative time and project time for your business, because the thing about choosing and adapting is that you need to apply 2 steps. Remember the ones we talked about a few moments ago? You need to classify. Is this urgent and important? Is this important, not urgent? If so, my response is going to be. And then you need to do effective delegation. Now that delegation may constitute, or maybe what you do is you say it's urgent and important. That goes into the half an hour after lunchtime that I've set aside for urgent and important. If it's just important, it might go into, that's my project time. Thursday mornings, I'll do the quick communication to do it with the customer saying, this is when I'm going to be dealing with it, but I'm actually going to do it then. If you have a team, and many of us do, whether it's an actual team who report to us or a remote team, the most important thing to do here is to make sure that you involve those people in the doing. Of course, to get that done effectively, notice I said I've put in there effective delegation. What you need to do is you need to have defined what their role is. You need to have trained them to do it. You need to support them in doing it to the quality that you like. And you need to be very careful to hand it over and monitor in regular meetings. Oh, and the last one, involve them in review. Program regular review so that you can do this, so you can let go, so that you can put it into your systems. So the last of those strategies that we were talking about that are needed for being adaptive and effective business continuity planning is to actually think outside the square. One of our worst enemies is, I've always done it this way. They've always done it this way. Everyone else does it this way. Isn't going to cut it. We know we're going to move on into the future. People are much more accepting of things like remote meetings. Wow, that saves us travel time. Maybe what we do is, instead of saying that every customer meeting must be face-to-face, if you're doing something like I do, planning projects, consulting, business consulting, maybe once a month they're face-to-face, and the ones in between are Zoom or phone calls. There's your adapt. I need more time. I'm going to need to adapt this in a way that works for the customer as well as working for me. In fact, one of our biggest tools is something that we kind of tend to forget about. It's one of those things, you know, when you do something, you know, any of you done a SWOT before? Bet you have. What I want to know is, have you renewed your SWOT since COVID? Did you renew your SWOT as you went into COVID? Those 2 things there are very important. The SWOT is the plan part that we talked about in business continuity planning. Of course, it's not the only tool you can use, but it is one that we're fairly familiar with. So I want to go for something that's just enough to get me to something effective. So a SWOT is turning the weaknesses and the threats into strengths and opportunities. It's also taking advantage of our strengths and opportunities and using those to help us adapt and think outside the square. Now, I'm keen to just summarise our answers to the initial questions we had. So let's go on to doing that. So first of all, in order to be adaptive in our thinking, to be able to recognise situations which are unusual, to decide what to do, we need to have our heads in the right place. So where you start, you. Not so unusual, but actually it's you. You're the business owner, though you're the senior person, you need to think about you. In fact, I have got 3 very close friends and coaches whom I often think about when I try to remember to do this to help me maintain my focus. One is my husband. And what he's always said to me is, Christine, if you're not okay, we're not okay. And I'd say that applies in his context to our family, the 4 of us. But to us in business, it's very true. If you are the owner or you are the senior manager, if you're not okay, nor is anyone else. Morale is impacted by what they see you do. So if they see you blowing it, if they see you getting really anxious and working from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, or even worse, 3 in the morning till 6 at night, then they will feel like they need to do it too. So number 1, you need to look after you, and next, you need to look after your staff. Coping with information overload is part of looking after you, and the same for your staff. Don't pepper them. On the other hand, don't allow yourself to be peppered. The next is working at a demanding pace. Working at a demanding pace requires that what you do is choose what you work on and when you work on it. And last but not least, you need to think outside the square to address what's coming up. I'll give you an example. I know somebody who has a business as a nutritionist and provides face-to-face personal training. In comes COVID, gym closed. So she and her team raced like crazy, and what they did is created the possibility of outside boot camps and training which met the requirements for restrictions in COVID. Wait for it, 2 weeks in, not allowed to do that anymore. So what they had to do then was to shift, take equipment home, do Zoom meetings for online boot camps, do the same for coaching with people internally and externally to their homes, and shift to more online. Those things were how they got to be adaptive, how they got to keep the business going so that now they're in a position to say, I need to think about how to go even further online, and maybe I'll even expand in the next 12 to 18 months into delivering overseas, because once I'm online, I can do this anywhere. That's what adaptive thinking looks like. Not sure what it looks like in your business, but my next thing to do is to say, let's hand this session over to you. I'm sorry, it went to the wrong slide. So I'm handing the session over to you. So if you would like to ask any questions, or if there are any other questions already, Jack, Please feel free to use either the chat or the Q&A.
No questions yet. I'll let you know when there are.
Okay, so what sort of questions could you perhaps ask? So while you're thinking, I'm going to go back to a slide which slipped past me. I wonder, have you thought about the strengths that you bring to your business and how those could help you adapt in an unusual circumstance? And I've put up one here where we're talking about strengths. Your network as an owner or as a senior person in the business is actually one of your strengths, if it's big, or if it's with people who do similar things to you, or if it's with companies that know about things that you don't quite know how to do. You could, for instance, during COVID, have used that strategy as a strategy. You could have used that network to find out about available supports. And then the other side is perhaps your weakness in your business is that you've always done things a certain way. So I'm thinking that that could be, for instance, a restaurant. They've always delivered in person on the spot. I wonder if you've seen the ads on NTTV where what happened is a pub with a drive-through. What they decided to do was do takeaway drive-through. So they used their chefs, they used their ovens, they added to their drive-through takeaway meals. So their exploration of alternative delivery approaches kept their business going. Now they're positioned to move forward. And in fact, what they're thinking about is keeping that drive-through takeaway going. So Jack, have we got any other questions at the minute?
No, not that I can see.
Okay, well, that's all right. I'd like to finish then with going from over to you. Let's just do our final top tips for success before we close off. If you've got any questions, do put them in. So our top tips for success in your business, because remember that's where we started, is know your why. When you know your why, it helps you filter what you do, but it also helps you keep going. Know the value you add to your customers, your value proposition. Again, that'll help you filter what you do and help you choose adaptive things to do. The next is choose and tailor what you take on. Now, I've said take in, I meant take on. So quite often people say, you have to do this because everyone else is doing it, or I think it's a good idea. No, I want you to think about tailoring what you take on and going, yes, I hear you've got a problem and so can help you if it's not in your space. The next is do take the opportunity to keep your SWOT refreshed. I reckon at the moment we should be thinking about our SWOT being refreshed, reconsidered, I think every 4 to 6 weeks at the moment. Traditionally, we tend to do it once a month. Oh, no, actually once a year. I think once a month to 6 weeks is what we should be doing at the moment, and concentrate on the things which are weaknesses and threats and turning them into strengths and opportunities. The next is, having done that planning based on your SWOT analysis, be ready. We don't know what's coming next. Remember to do that classification, urgent and important. Choose how you act on it. And last of all, be comfortable with taking action. So thank you very much for attending today. I hope you've gotten value about what we've talked about. And please feel free to fill in the feedback form and to look out for the recording of the session. Thank you, Jack, for your support today.
Yeah, no, good. We have had no more questions.
Okay, all right. Well, then what we'll do is we'll finish the session, and I'm hoping that you're all very comfortable with what we've done today, and we look forward to seeing you again.